Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another eSport interview. My name is Sawyer. I work with virtual college counselors, helping students through the college admission process. And today I'm joined by Jordan Oliver, Esports Manager at Hawaii Pacific University. Jordan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to be here. We're going to be talking a lot about esports, about video gaming communities. Really, the point of this video is if you are a student or a family or even another professional in the higher ed world, and you are interested in learning more about collegiate esports or kind of how to help students or support students through the process, we want to give just a really quick 30-minute dive into what that looks like, what students can do or what they can think about, and any other interesting tidbits that we get along the way. But really, to start us off, I think something that I emphasize a lot with my students when I work with them is the power of a story or a narrative, right? Like your journey is inherently powerful, whether it's because of a college essay, or it's how you're building your activities list, or even just what college you want to go to and what kind of vibe you're looking for. And so in that vein, Jordan, I want to ask you to give us the quick, in a nutshell version of kind of your story, right? How did you get introduced to gaming, and how did that eventually lead to you having, a job in the industry, so to speak?
Yes, 100%. So, lifelong gamer, like many of us, love gaming. I had an older brother who was a gamer, so that was kind of the first in that made things a little bit more frictionless for me. Anyways, so lifelong gamer. The birthday party was usually like a gaming party, a LAN
Mm-hmm.
party, something like that. And that's always stuck with me. So some of my most formative experiences were gaming. Um, Strongest bonds, gaming, things like that. So
Right.
went to college. Wasn't sure what I wanted to end up in, but the idea was like eventually maybe in the entertainment industry, movies, gaming, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
love this. So got into marketing and journalism. Did a lot of freelance work. For years actually, became more and more gaming and tech centric. And as like esports grew, and I was traveling around the world at the time with a lot of this freelance stuff, I kind of just fell in love more and more with the idea of belonging in that ecosystem, like as a
Mm-hmm.
professional. So all of my things, all of my work, my portfolioing, which really is a key takeaway from this, is the whole time I leverage technology to sort of portfolio this and keep track, right? Make a website and all this. Anyways, did some writing for a lot of cool companies and some consulting work. Worked for like Game Rant and a couple other publishers, and eventually taught some college certificates, got involved in education. So started teaching at a high school and collegiate level, and eventually made my way to Randolph College, where I started a collegiate program there, did their varsity, and now I'm at Hawaii Pacific University as esports manager, and they have a bit of a more of a footprint. So there's a lot going on, but it's sort of exists at the intersection of all those other pieces I mentioned with business and marketing and retail and events, but mainly education, community building, and gaming, like
Right.
esports.
I Two thoughts that immediately come to mind. First of all, the older brother bit, because I had an older brother too. Two older brothers. One was interested in gaming, and I remember so distinctly one of my favorite things ever was he kept a spiral notebook where he loved Mortal Kombat. And so any code to get to a later level, any fatality inputs he needed, he would manually write them in this journal.
That's
and
awesome.
and I remember so distinctly that I even remember the cover. It was like a bunch of different multicolored, like hippy dippy smiley faces, kind of that like mid 90s vibe, so to
Yeah.
speak. And that was like something that I remember so distinctly. I also remember he broke a lot of controllers. He was one of those one of those gamers when he would play fighting games. Um,
And gamings were another level back then. The challenge was real. I've tripped over the power cord to
uh,
our console, like NES, SNES, when like game over, right? There's no save games. While my
no.
brother was like at Bowser, and I mean, like I understand that. And yeah, we had the Tips and Tricks magazine,
Oh
Game
yeah.
Before, but like that was our like, oh, what's the code? We had the Game Shark.
I need to put my I had those. I think they were Brady guides, the like nice strategy guides. And I remember when I was younger, we couldn't always afford the video games, and they wouldn't always be available to rent at like a Blockbuster or movie gallery. And I remember I would go to like a Books a Million and I would just read those gaming guides because that was like my vicarious way of playing the game.
That's awesome.
And so I actually still have like a handful of them that like were super impactful. A lot of Final Fantasy, a lot of Resident Evil, like those kinds of games, kind of across the spectrum. But the other thing I was gonna say is that the thing I like about this series, and the thing that we try and talk a lot with our students about, is that the journey is very rarely straightforward, right? To go anywhere or anything. I always use myself as an example because I was, did really great in college, did really great in high school, had all these great things lined up, jet program to go over and teach English in Japan. I had, a bunch of other things. And like within the last month of college, everything fell through. And I was like, uh-oh, what do I do now? And like it was a twisty world where I ended up in admissions and I truthfully loved it, but I don't think I've ever spoken to a single person who woke up as like an 8-year-old and was like, man, I can't work in college admissions. Most people just kind of fumble into it, and some people love it and some people use it as kind of a transition. Anyway,
That's
so
super true. Yeah, it's not a linear path at all. And I encourage people to like not be discouraged if you find yourself off track. It's very much more like I use a sailing metaphor sometimes of like tacking, you kind of have to go side.
Yeah.
Can't go right in the winds. They did a lot of tacking, zigzagging to get to this, to where I am for sure. But
that's exactly it. So starting off with just one of the most common questions that I get, but also that according to Google Trends and data analytics, like this is one of the most common questions, in your own words, because for every person working in esports, there's going to be a different definition here, but in your words, and in your mind, like what is an esport, or what are esports?
Yeah, it's such a loaded question. I love the question, but I derail it a bit. And it all stems from a conversation I had with Chris Hanna, who works for Esports Observer, which is a really good business publication for esports. And he asked me this question, and I gave him a very much expected answer at the time, competitive esports. And I was really trying to sell the skill building and parallels to traditional sports and everything. And he kind of hit me back with that he thinks esports is culture. It's a new section of culture. I've said this before, but I really think it hit it on the head perfectly for what we're trying to do at the collegiate level on so many things. It's shortchanging it to sort of like define these 6 players on a bench or on the seats and like playing in this thing when it really is the stadium, like with the footprint of with that baseball diamond on a college campus or this massive college football field, like all of those jobs, all the trainers, the people that are squirting Gatorade, the people that are icing cramps on the field, like that is esports to me. And like that is what an esport. And you can sort of say, well, the question of like, is this video game? Is this a sport?
Right.
Well, we're at the point where I can hit a lot of those definition points of is it competitive, the hours it takes for mastery, skill ceiling, skill floor, team aspects, heart rate, reaction time, all of that. But now I can say we also have the locker room staff and we have the stadium, like the real legitimacy, right? And the money and all this. So esports, like that's sort of, we're struggling at, liberal arts colleges need to start exploring this question. What is esports? Because I think it's culture. I think it's an industry. I think it's competitive, and I think it's the future of entertainment. I really do. I think it's the next iteration or the next step.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been interesting and has kind of struck me in all the previous interviews we've done so far is the aspect of culture. And I know a lot of students know this, especially because students in high school right now are kind of in this maybe like a golden age of like the gamer culture, right? Like it's never been easier to connect with other people. Video games in general have never been more open to anybody. I mean, even just having phone games, people who can pick up a phone and may have never touched a controller in their entire life, and like they're waking up every day to play like some version of a cooking game where they don't want to pay for it, so they got to have a daily streak, or even like Wordle, like all these different things that kind of combine with this idea of like culture, competitiveness, like sharing these feelings and experiences. I think that that's something that I've really enjoyed, and I think parents will really enjoy, because I think a lot of parents don't think of esports as traditional sports. And a lot of times maybe that's the closest metaphor you can get to like kind of hook them in to maybe see a bigger picture. But one of the things that I would be interested in hearing more about is, when we talk about these programs, it is very much kind of culture, right? And so in that sense, when we think of, your program that you're managing right now, like what is the culture of that program? Like who's involved? Are there any core pillars or like rules or ideas that govern that? Tell us a little bit about the culture of your program in particular.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, I think that that's a really good differentiator and something that makes us unique in Hawaii is that we're super diverse. It's a really diverse population at Hawaii Pacific University. We're also open to the public. Our arena is open to public every day at 11.
Right.
So just bringing that mix, right? So we have a lot of vested gamers that are local who come in here of every background, both male and female too. Like,
right.
Actually hits better on like what it should, like that 40 to 50% participation of where we're almost just at parity of who's participating coming out. So we have a lot of people that come through here. Like it's really diverse campus, but we also are downtown in Honolulu in Hawaii.
Yeah.
So, there's also just the travelers who come through and are just like, oh, what is this? And then we are on an island. So there's not many options once you do get the local community. So we get this really passionate, like hardcore gaming community, but also just people who want to have fun and people who are just kind of here, right? We're here. Where are we going to go? So we do hit this broad spectrum of gaming and e-culture. Like we'll have groups of we have our South Korean groups that come in and they'll play StarCraft or MOBA, like RTS heavy MOBA games. And I have no idea what's going on or being strategized, but I can tell you it's super passionate and it's really awesome for the energy in the arena when we have that going on. Like it's great. So in like our FGC community and Smash Bros community that comes in, it's so unique. I'm telling you, we have like, so this is sort of might be a stretch of a comparison in some respects, but I've been to a pro hockey game in Montreal, and I'd expected like passion, rowdiness, but during the match is actually really serious and quiet until something happens because they love the game. Right. It's like passionate about what's going on moment to moment. Something happens and you sort of have these bursts of emotions. I swear sometimes our arena could be like the quietest tournament you've ever been to because it's like these are real like gamers in here right now. Like it's quiet, like they don't want the music and the pump circumstance.
Right. They want to focus.
Have to force the like that. Yeah. And then other times we really have like chill, just that sort of laid back, more community, which is what we're really trying to build out more. And competitive wise, again, a range, but like our club and varsity competitive as far as rank wise skews towards we're not at immortal, we're actually looking for sort of farm out and grow throughout your 4 years with us. Don't get me wrong, we'd love to build like our teams around like those key positions and players, but we're a small school and it's academics first, so we have to balance that and really make good on our word to like, okay, we want community programming and like events that can consistently double down on like this is an investment for the community, it's an innovative investment for our education, but we have to hit like now that we're easing up from COVID, we really need to service our gamers in Hawaii. Like I've got my work cut out for me. I mean, we have we just got on Smash Bros World Tour, so like it's the only spot in Hawaii you can get official points until November right now. But we'd love to help out like other gamers and communities in Hawaii, like set up their own gaming night. And, we kind of want to be that. So it's interesting in our position there. The community and the vibe and the culture is actually really cool because it's not siloed. It's really spread out. Like it's awesome.
I love that. And I love that too, because that's what, and we were even talking about this a little bit beforehand, but like, that's what I think has continually kept me in, even as I've gotten older, maybe busier, life takes a lot more precedent. Like, even if I can't play games as much, there's still so many ways to get involved, right? You can watch them, you can find your own little niche. I mean, one of the things that I would always tell people is like, gaming to me was a way to connect with friends, right? Like, and especially as we got farther away, like we would have game nights. We still have game nights. And even moving past that, like using virtual stuff, we do a lot of virtual D&D. And like, that's how we keep on top of each other, is like once every 2 weeks, we'll all sit down, high school friends have been friends for 18 plus years, and we'll play a Dungeons and Dragons game, or maybe like a Civilization or something that
That's
like we can
awesome.
all kind of like connect back with, because it helps to keep those relationships alive in that way when you're not in the same place, not in the same time zone, and everybody's got a lot of stuff going on in their life.
Yeah, it really is sort of that, like, we also, I like joke about, like, sometimes with my own circle with that, like, that notification of an invite is like the glue that's really actually kept us together. It's like,
Right.
oh, they're like that access,
That's
it's
it is unique, and that's something that I think is really different about, well, similar in some ways, but also very different when we think of like traditional sports like a soccer, a football, a basketball, and we think of like esports, is that there are almost like there's two positions when we think of like traditional sports, right? There's players and there's viewers, and in that sense, like I think a lot of this is changing now, but for a long time, like the fans never went on the field, right? Like even if they played, they were never playing at the skill level that their professionals might play at. They would watch, but usually it was watching. They might have a couple people they know, but usually there's a lot of people on the team. Not maybe as much personality, like those one or two big personalities come out. Maybe you have your guy who's not a big personality, but you're statistically in love with him because he's performing well or she's performing well. But it really is, it's almost like player and viewer. And I think the interesting thing about esports is that there certainly are players and viewers, but there's a lot of in between that, right? Like everything from the culture, creators out there. There's the people who are maybe like putting on some of these events on smaller or local scales. You have some people who are playing, at an amazing level, but they're not professionals. But they could be playing with professionals online. And I think that's something that's a little different. Is like you're never going to have a pickup game of football where you're like stumble into a famous professional player. But there are scenarios in which you can kind of either via someone else or even sometimes yourself, depending on how much time and energy you put into a game, like you can end up being a part of that community in a really meaningful way.
100%. Definitely agree. 100%. Like, I can't stress that to your students or anyone that you're watching about that this wiggle room and this, it will shrink. And this is
Right.
a really, really, like you said, sort of this golden age. It's not just for like the amount of opportunity and content that's being put to our liking, but it really is just sort of like your ability to carve out your path in this, to your ability to specialize and to just to focus on what you like within the space and grow it out. Like there's wiggle room now, there's room for growth. And these students and their parents just have to sort of support it, raise their hand and say, like, I'm doing it and I want to do it.
Right.
It's going to go away. It will, because best practices are being defined right now.
Right.
The way is being defined right now. They will be the ones to define it, and they'll be the ones to hire people and say, you're doing it my way because I did it the best and was most successful. But eventually, some of these questions we won't be able to define as loosely.
Right.
And I just can't stress the opportunity that they have right now for that in between. Like you said, there's players and there's viewers with traditional sports a lot. And I think, I don't know what the timeline was, but in the earlier, days of these sports, if they had had the technology we had,
right,
there would have been, now it's sort of this gold rush. Like you can culturally influence esports right now on TikTok and YouTube, easily with specialization and with some consistency, versus it's really, really hard. I mean, like you mentioned, the top guy, you got like Steph Curry and LeBron are influencing basketball, and it's really tough to find out, who's along the way. And of course, those guys are getting endorsement deals and they're making money too. But the fact is, like, you realize I can do some fact finding and information finding here by listening to these sorts of opportunities you're putting out, and just keep going on my own and doing what I'm doing, follow these opportunities in high school and go to college.
Or even something really small that a lot of people don't think about, broadcasters or shoutcasters, like people who legitimately might not play the game hardly at all, but know so much about it and are so passionate that they are the hype people for the game. So much
value.
Where
there's that story.
Right. You get a great caster involved. And that's one of the reasons, I mean, two that immediately stand out to me are going back to roots in esports for me, like StarCraft or RTS, like when you get a really hyped game and people are just like crowds are shouting, people are shouting, like that was one of the reasons I fell in love with it. And the other one you mentioned earlier, the fighting game community. Like I am garbage at fighting games. They are just, I'm not good at them at all. It doesn't matter what level they are, but like I still watch Evo, you know, a streamed fighting game tournament every year because I get so excited just because they are excited. And like that kind of passion is infectious. So like it's one of those things where there's so many different in between roles that can like kind of help define where you are and what you want to be.
Yeah, they really are.
Taking a step back, so I'm going to give you a case study of hypothetically 2 students and kind of talk about maybe where you would suggest, let's say they're sophomores or juniors in high school and they're just starting the college search and starting to think about a lot of this. The first one, our first case study, let's say we've got a young adult who is, you know, really top notch, you know, when we talk about skills, whatever their particular poison might be. They maybe, you know, obviously a popular game, but they are just really top notch, you know, up there with the highest ranks, like really just gold star when we think of athletics in the esports world. But they've got fine grades, you know, maybe they're not super stellar grades, but it's good enough to do well at school. They understand academics come first. For that kind of a student where really the skill is the highlight, like what would you suggest for them right now as they're kind of honing their skills, as they're getting involved in those communities and they're starting to think about, okay, I'm halfway through high school. I need to start thinking about college, or is it collegiate esports, or do I try and go professional? Like from your perspective, what advice would you give that student?
Yeah, so that's a great question. For that student, I would definitely I would keep my eyes on the prize. I would not go do away with the best practices of trying to go through education if you have that momentum. Of course, I really think that esports though could be that vehicle, and I stress for that person to keep up their esports skills and keep doing what they're doing. So at this point in your academic and esports career, I would suggest if you're playing, let's just say 8 hours a week for ease, even though it's probably way more than this if we're talking about this level, right? But if you're playing 8 hours a week, maybe start considering playing 7.5 or 7 hours a week and taking an hour to sum up your content, your experience, and start, you know, at least doing an hour of that, like, or once a week. You know, if you're playing 20 hours a week, to play 19 and do an hour of content, wrap up and break down and figure out what sort of position you're in versus, you know, last week or week to week, and you start to really build this portfolio. I'd also be realistic about what you want out of your collegiate experience. You know, you don't necessarily have to have a degree or a job in place when I say this, but make sure that you go to a program or you enter into a program that's going to work for you as well. And I don't mean work for you necessarily in the doing work for you, although it should if you're, you know, coming to play for them, but that's going to work for you and be a good fit. And that's their practice team, you know, their team culture, their varsity or club structure fits for you and can support you, right? So as part of that, spending an hour a week portfolioing and charting your journey, I would say, you know, it's really comes down to raising your hand and letting us know that you're here and that you exist. It's really tough to, you know, just go on Twitch and look at things. It's getting easier with more and more high school and collegiate tournaments, but really raise your hand. Go on YouTube and find the U's of the world, you know, so and ask questions on YouTube or whatever email or link I shout out, send that message. And hey, if you can be professional, great. If you can manage to do a kindest regards at the end, awesome. But I get stuff that says, hi, I'm interested in esports, all one line, here's my gamer tag. And, you know, I follow up and I do due diligence on those students as well. You know, maybe that's I'll teach them how to do that. They're good at this component, right? So I understand that, and colleges understand that, and we want you and we want to support you, but definitely raise your hand, show mom and dad this video and try to get them on board with your vision. And you really start to see that the time you're putting into this, if you're this good, you should be mastering these skills. In any other time period, if you put this amount of time into something, you'd be an artisan or a master, you know, like that 3 years of doing it, or, you know, and you should 10,000 hours and builds a profession or a master of any art and skill. And like, these students are putting this in. So just start to think about how you're going to curate that. If I'm telling you it has value, trust that it has value,
Right.
and start to figure out, okay, this authentic knowledge I'm getting, even if it's just being in the room, being in queue this amount of time is giving me
Right.
knowledge other people don't have. And companies and colleges need that knowledge. We want to build and help foster and grow that knowledge. So don't be discouraged. Don't like let people tell you you're wasting your time, but maybe think about your time with intent, right?
Right.
And raise your hand and say, I'm here.
I think that's a great thing. And we talk about this even outside of esports. When I work with a student and they are interested in like music production, or they're interested in film production or making videos or short films or art, very much into art. One of the first things I ask them when I start working, especially if it's early on, like if I'm lucky enough to start working with them in like freshman year or sophomore year of high school, I'm like, well, do you have an online presence? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you need to. Like, and it's intimidating. It can be scary. No one's ever happy, including me. No one's ever happy with the first thing they put online, even after polishing it and putting nice banners on the top and bottom and making sure you have a decent webcam setup. Like, no one is happy with that. It's hard. But like getting you out there, that's where you one get that easy linkable thing to say, hey, nice to meet you. This is me. And here's everything you need to know about me for this particular thing, whether it's art or, movies or video games. And that's something that we really emphasize, because nowadays with it being such a digitally fluent world, where at bare minimum, just having a website or some sort of document that you can hand to me and be like, here's where I am with my particular passion, that makes a world of difference.
It's huge. It makes up for so much. I mean, people say, I don't have a job, I've never had experience. Yes, you do. A snapshot, just like a JPEG of a tournament bracket final that you thumbnail at the bottom and say participated or tournament organized this for
right.
My third year in a row. That picture literally was now worth that 1,000 words and 1,000 hours. Like
right.
it is that simple, but you just have to put that little bit of legwork in.
Yeah. And I echo this, and I'm sure anybody who has watched multiple of these videos has heard this story, but like when I guess it was when I was about a junior or senior in high school, Halo Reach had just come out, and I played a lot of Halo Reach, and it was probably the first console game, I think, that like I got really into online stuff. Like, of course, Halo 2 and onward have been great for like competitive, like, Xbox Live multiplayer shooter kind of things. But Halo Reach was the first time I really started like to feel a community around that, as well as like the competitiveness. And I always think back to the fact that like I had a friend and we played duos, and we would play it. And as we played more and more, we climbed higher and higher. We kept seeing the same people. And like we started to befriend them. Eventually, at the time, Bungie's website had a really cool thing where you could design your own website within it, and like for your clan or your gamer tag or whatever it might be. And what started off as just us two ended up involving about 5 people. And by the time it reached its maximum, we had 27 people, and I only knew 3 of them. And like we were organizing game nights for multiple games, Red Dead Redemption, StarCraft 2, like anything that was popular, and even like monthly movie nights where like we would all just hop on and like start a movie at the same time. And I did all of this, no pay, no fancy, like, I wasn't making any money. I didn't have any social media influencing it. And like, I didn't tell anybody it. I didn't put it on any resume, didn't put it on activities list. And like looking back in hindsight now, I realize I'm like, man, I dedicated so much time and energy, and I loved every second of it. Like if I had told an adult all that I was doing and had the vocabulary to talk about the skills I was mastering, like any adult would know, like, hey, whether or not I like video games, this student is, building community and culture. They're organizing and scheduling. They've got all these things that they're working on.
And now those are job titles.
Right, exactly.
Then they weren't, right? Community manager, all of that. Like all of those that you just said, I see all the time being hired for. And I'm like, oh gosh, I know, like my student, like exactly, Discord management. It's
right.
Like this. It's wild.
It's so interesting. So want to be conscious of time, and I want to get to one more question before we kind of get to our closing piece. So one of the interesting things that I think a lot of parents don't know about sports or esports versus maybe traditional sports is that when we think of traditional sports, we kind of have like long-standing traditions, right? Like basketball, football, soccer, they've been around for a long time. And certainly the games and maybe the tactics have changed. Definitely like the size and popularity have changed. Maybe some sports were very big at one time and have kind of faded away a little bit more. But we kind of have like, the football that my father was watching when he was a 20-year-old is very similar to the football I'm watching right now. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that video games really kind of go in and out of waves, right? I will once again reference StarCraft here. StarCraft 2 was a huge follow-up to possibly one of the largest historical esports. And for several years, it was booming. Everybody was big, but like it eventually petered off and kind of went to the wayside. And a lot of those professionals who invested a lot of time and energy into that had to find other games, whether it was another game from the same company. So maybe they could utilize those connections. So maybe they go to Overwatch, or some went to Heroes of the Storm, which also eventually kind of petered out as well. But something I would be interested in hearing with you, just off the top of your head and in no particular order, what are maybe like 3 to 5 of maybe the most popular esports games you are seeing kind of in your program and in the community that you are building?
Yeah, great question. So I would say League of Legends is still strong in collegiate scene, and I see it maintaining that for the cycle of people that are interested in college now. So it's a good point, and I'll quickly get back to something else. But in that advice to sophomores and things, that's something that we should touch on. Really, is make sure don't silo yourself into, oh, I'm playing just this game, right? Because that game might not be around.
Right.
So there were some interesting people who were playing Overwatch, and Overwatch has kind of taken a step back in collegiate with some of, in some scenes with, some of the controversies and Overwatch 2 being delayed for so long, right? So Valorant has taken that position. But what do you do with students who have Overwatch scholarships and they're there for 4 years and it might not exist, right? These very scary sort of questions do pop up. So definitely be cognizant of that and trying to think of how my FPS skills translate, how my MOBA skills translate. Start to think about it from an analytical spot. So that's some good advice for students now. Getting back to though, so Valorant is kind of sneaking up here, with League of Legends, really, as far as like popularity. It's tough due to some of the FPS, optics and things like that. But I'd say it's a solid one if you're in Overwatch 2 and you're considering the 5v5 that is Overwatch 2. I'd say maybe strongly suggest Valorant, or if you're in our Rainbow Six or CSGO, start transitioning to Valorant if you can stomach it and grind it, or considering something like that if you want esports to be your vehicle. I would say great one though, Rocket League. I would say Rocket League is only going to go bigger and bigger as we see middle school and Vanta and high school leagues. It's safe, it's compelling, it's readable, it's legible. Parents like it. I can't get enough students in it, so I'm hungry for collegiate age Rocket League players. I personally like Rocket League too. So I think Rocket League is a big one and a good one to look at. Smash Bros, I think at a community and involvement level is a great one to look at. I think it would be a tough way to go into if you want to be a professional player. But if you want a great collegiate experience with opportunities to meet people, do tournament organizing, stream, asset creation, Smash Bros, it's going to be here for a long time, and the FGC at large. I think I'd probably leave it at those for now, although I'm sure there's going to be people screaming at me saying I missed something.
Everybody always misses something, and
that's kind of we love our Fortnite students, don't get me wrong, and there's lots of opportunities for them. I think Unreal and Fortnite and Epic will be around in some something, and I don't sleep on like Minecraft and things like that. I really don't. We're all for it here, but those are the big ones right now.
It's always interesting because I always think of a game that lots of people, even my roommate and I joke about this, but like the game, my game that kind of passed on, but I still love it and I refuse to let it go, Warcraft 3. Like I still play Warcraft. It's installed on my computer right now, which looks super goofy because it's like, I think even with a decade plus, maybe even 2 decades of updates and DLC or I guess expansions, it's like 700 megabytes.
I would love to see a return to RTS.
And so it's one of those things where I joke because the only time I can even play Warcraft 3 is usually Friday nights or Saturday nights, and it feels like it's when the people who are in their 30s and 40s can maybe peel away from family or job responsibilities, and and you finally have like 300 people playing, and that's enough to get a couple games going. But I do think it's important because there are a lot of people who will silo themselves into a particular esport or a particular game. And sometimes those transition, right? Like I think a lot of RTS players found the MOBA scene, and it was basically like, okay, well, we abandoned macro and we're only thinking about micro right now. Or same thing with FPS. Like there are some differences along the way, but Team Fortress 2 players kind of found the Overwatch niche, and then Counter-Strike kind of naturally leads to a Valorant. Kind of an overlap with that. It's all becoming kind of hybrid now, a lot of different aspects. But it is important because unlike someone who might have started playing soccer as a kindergartner and now is in college playing soccer, like that's the same soccer. But if they had started playing, any number of competitive sport, like video games, it might be different.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
An interesting one that I want to do to finish up this particular question, and you might or might not have a good answer for it. I'm always interested to know either what is a game that you think is kind of on the rise, like a game that is going to be kind of bigger down the road. You mentioned Rocket League, of course, but maybe one that hasn't quite reached that yet. Or alternatively, what is a game or a genre that you would love to see just revived and has just been sleeping for a while, or you haven't seen a lot of interest in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So personally, like I would love to see more. I'd like to see a return to, like I said, I would like to see some sort of real-time strategy come back on the competitive scene, or maybe there's a new iteration, like some new IP. I would just like to see like that step back into the macro sort of. I don't know. I really like that sort of. I think it's compelling. It's fun to watch. I'd like to see more support, honestly, of some sort of structured FGC community within like collegiate. It's so tough with the optics of a head-to-head fight in games, but I would love to someone to crack that code and figure out what that looks like. And lastly, not really a popular answer at all, but I sort of like new genres that I think have space in competitive scene. So recently there was that game Lemniscate. I don't know if you heard that came out, but it was like real time, like turn-based real-time like FPS. It's really interesting, like messing with time loops. But I think there was some unexplored mechanics there that I think are perfect fit for like collegiate, because people really want to see, well, how are we massaging our brains? Where's the analysis in moment to moment? And I don't know. I think games like that, where you're working with the clock, and you also you're reacting, but you can give it some thought and analysis, like new fundamentals. I would like to just see expanding things, kind of broadening. Like you said, people in FPS like that step out from Team Fortress to Overwatch, like that transition that happened in there when it clicked. Like I feel like that's the magic. Like I love that.
So.
And I don't know. Maybe as the older I get, it's tough for me to get through the first couple hours of games when the mechanics are so familiar. So I take it for granted that I'm familiar with a lot of the fundamentals, but when new games come out, like even not new, but like Elden Ring coming out, and just being thrown in, like some people are just so frustrated. I'm just so like, it's a breath of fresh air for me to struggle in a game.
That's exactly how, and I am going through it right now, and like taking my sweet time where like, I had a couple friends who would text me and be like, have you beaten this boss yet? Have you beaten this boss yet? I'm like, nah, man, I'm with my horse. We're traveling the countryside. I found a giant bear, and like, I'm trying to figure out what its deal is. And like, for me, it's meditative almost to kind of go in and when I talk about this a lot with movies, when you've been watching or playing games or watching movies for so long, sometimes just something new is good enough to kind of give you that breath of fresh air without going down a completely different path of like movies. I'm a big fan of A24 Studios, like, because not all their movies are great. Some of their movies are great, and they get up there and they play with the best of them, and they should be winning awards. Some of their movies are just solid 7 out of 10s. but they're fresh and they're new ideas. And like, even if I walk away and I'm like, that was a 7 out of 10, if it's something new and fresh, like that sticks with me, where I'm like,
Counts.
yes. And that is so true of the same thing with video game. I mean, any content you consume, I guess you could even say that for traditional sports, right? Like you've seen the same thing so many times that when that one person comes out and breaks the mold and just changes the game, you're sitting there and you're like, wow, I can't get enough of this. Like, this is such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to see some more mechanics for the, push the boundaries, even though it's some more risk taking, I guess,
right.
In gaming and what we see. But really, I love it. I love the possibilities of it, like you said, and just some new stuff coming down, throw us in the deep end. I like to challenge my players, but some of these updates and patches, it's like, this is rough. This is not the challenge we were waiting for.
Yeah, that is so true. And that's a whole nother discussion, is that once again, like with esports, like the game can radically change every season. It'd be like going into a football game being like, all right, everybody, we got 2 footballs now on the field.
Yes, seriously.
And people are like, what? Or they're like, okay, well, anybody who runs, you got to run at half speed. And it's like,
yeah,
what?
exactly. You were doing too good last season. You can only run at half speed from now on. Like,
so
wait, what?
And in some ways that can be frustrating for players. In other ways, it can be really exciting, because it is kind of keeping everything fresh, and that's maybe how we keep these games in the longevity. Sure. But it is always exciting to just see those changes as they come out.
It is.
So,
it is.
Like I said, I want to be cognizant of time. Jordan, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I have the Twitter for sorry, apparently I live next to a racetrack.
No worries, barely came through.
So, I have all of HPU's different social medias on the screen right now. They're also going to be in the description of the YouTube video when it gets logged up. For Twitter, I specifically have the HPU Esports. But if they want to get more involved, if they want to hear more from you or about your program, what's the best next steps?
Yeah, so go out to our website, hpu.edu/esports, or find us on socials at HPU Esports, and just reach out. DM us, send us a message. You can send me an email, jjoliver@hpu.edu personally, and I can help you get connected with admissions. We have an application for scholarships, super simple form on our website to fill out, up to 6K. And we just want good communicators, right? Skill-based and need-based, merit-based. So just show up, really. But yeah, find us, just send us a message, though. Doesn't have to be crazy formal. Just let us know you exist.
Awesome. And same thing, if anybody is interested in learning more about virtual college counselors, you can see all of our social media on the screen. We're pretty lucky because no one has the name virtual college counselor, so we managed to snag up just about all of that. But likewise, if you have questions, if you thought there was an interesting topic in this video and you want to hear more about it, shoot me an email, reach out to me, leave a comment, whatever it might be, because I love this stuff. This is almost more of a passion project for the gaming community for me, rather than it is for finding like potential clients or things like that. So I want to answer questions, and I would love to make more of these videos in the future, specifically about other programs, but also maybe doing roundtable discussions about, particular things that are happening in the collegiate scene, or even just the idea of what are the up and coming games, what are some of the challenges, how can organizations better support their gamers, any number of things. So regardless of whether you're watching live right now or you're watching a month later on YouTube, don't be shy. Just like Jordan said, you just got to raise your hand, right? Show us that you're out there. Ask some questions. If you have the question, I guarantee there's at least 1,000 other people that have the same question, just haven't asked it yet. But Jordan, once again, thank you very much for taking a little bit of time. It was awesome to have you. And that is the end of the video, end of the stream. Thanks for joining, everybody. We're going to transition out, and hopefully you'll join us next time.